One of the things that's always interesting about a driver is the name. Mizuno has traditionally been, you don't want to say boring or predictable, but it's like we had the ST190 and then the ST200. Everybody expects the ST210. But what we wanted to try to do was change it up a little bit this year. So now you're going to see the STZ and the STX. What we wanted to do is really dial in a specific engineering difference between these, make it more interesting, and give you something to think about that we can actually show you visually why this club is different than the previous version. So the Z and the X refer to different axes. And again, I'm going to go into my engineering speak because when you're designing a club, you're always speaking in three axes when you're designing in three dimensions. The X-axis, the Y-axis, and the Z-axis. So the name refers to where we're placing our mass on each of the heads. The STZ, we wanted to focus more of the mass closer to the Z-axis, so pulling more mass back. If you can get it back on that Z-axis, you're going to add stability. You're going to make the club more consistent. You're going to make it straighter hitting. You can even see from the use of the composite where we took mass away from the extremes, away from what would be the Z-axis, so that we could focus more mass directly on that Z-axis. That's going to lead to a very, very stable driver. The STX, on the other hand, X referring to the X-axis, which is the axis going across the face in this direction, we wanted to move the center of gravity more towards the heel, further along that X-axis. As you pull it closer this direction, it allows that head more rotation. So you can see what we did is actually took mass away here, more composite from the toe, which strips mass there and focuses more on the heel. So by putting and concentrating more weight here, that's going to move that center of gravity this direction, along the X-axis to encourage that ball flight. The ST190 had a great group of technologies that were the first of a number of steps that have evolved to get us to where we are right now. It featured an SP700 face, which was an alpha beta titanium. That alpha beta brought a little bit of that beta titanium in to give you more ball speed. It was the first time we'd weighted a golf club as we had with this one, with a large focus of mass in the back and then our wave technology in the front to make sure it's great ball speed, but also very stable. From the 190 to the 200, we actually made a jump straight from that alpha beta SP700 to a fully beta titanium. So a new face material. We took the first step with the 190, and with the 200, we took it a step further. That beta is going to give you even more ball speed out of it. It's going to have a better recovery rate than the previous one. And that's what that beta allows you to do, is get even more ball speed out of it. One of the things you'd notice if you played all of them, from the 190 to the 200, you see ball speed improvements, but then there was a little bit of a sound change between them. So the ST200 was a little bit louder from there. So from the ST200 now to the STZ, we've continued and evolved that beta titanium face and actually optimized it even further. So we thinned out an additional area a little bit lower on the face for even more consistent ball speed. It still features a very similar weighting profile as the 190 and the 200, but we actually saved even more mass by bringing the composite to the sole as well. And that allowed us to do a couple of things. That allowed us to more optimize the weighting, make it more stable, but also allowed us to address the sound, to give it a very dense, solid, powerful sound at impact. So each of these has evolved to make a product that performs even better than the last. When you take your first look at the STZ and the STX from the crown side, at initial glance you might not see too much of a difference. However, the more you look at them and hold them side by side, there are subtle differences between these two that might lead a player towards one versus the other. The STZ is more of a larger footprint. It's deeper from front to back, it's longer from toe to heel. It's designed for stability. It's designed to be very consistent in ball flight and for a ball that goes very straight. The STX driver is a little bit deeper. The face from top to bottom is a little bit taller, it's shorter from heel to toe, and a little bit shorter from front to back. What that's going to do is give the player a slightly different look at address. It also is going to help us position the center of gravity slightly shallower and slightly towards the heel. That's going to encourage more of a ball flight that turns from right to left. So between these two, even though they both look beautiful from the top, even though they've got the great Mizuno look, they're actually subtly going to do something very different. From the sole side, you can tell exactly what these clubs are intended to do. We use composite to save a number of grams to make sure we can redistribute the weight to make sure the club performs in a very specific way. With the STZ, you can see mass removed from the toe and the heel. We removed equal parts from either side of the sweet spot to make sure that this club is very stable and has no bias towards it. It's designed to go straight, it's designed to go high, it's designed to be very, very forgiving. On the other hand, the STX, where we removed weight, is a little bit different. Rather than just from the toe and the heel, we really increased the size of the window from the toe. So we removed more mass from the toe side and concentrated more mass in the heel. What that's going to allow us to do is bring the center of gravity closer to the shaft axis to allow for a club that's designed for it to be easier to turn over. One thing that's been very interesting through the testing of this, particularly with the tour players, is that it used to be a player was either an ST200 or an ST200X. There was really no crossover. Now between these two, we're actually seeing some players trying to bounce between which one is right for them. The deeper face of the X and the slightly shallower center of gravity is appealing to some players who aren't necessarily looking for a large draw. There are some things you can do with the weighting of this to make sure that it's not just a draw driver, that actually is a deeper face driver. So it's been really fun to experiment to see some players who had a notion that they were going to land in one and they don't particularly do that. When we have a new material like the SAT 2041 Beta Titanium, we know that there's potential for speed. We know that we can go very, very thin. However, from the manufacturing side and the real world side, there's always a slight fear because it's the fear of the unknown. Is it going to perform? Is it going to fatigue? Is it going to break? With the first generation, you always play it a little bit cautious. You always err slightly on the thicker side because of that unknown, because of that new material. Now that we're in the second generation of that Beta Titanium, we get even more aggressive. We thin it out even further, and we get even more ball speed out of that same material. When you compare the ST200X to the STX, it's a completely different golf club. Yes, we designed this to be able to fit with that M-Fusion shaft into that J-spec with this aluminum weight here, but also that weight now, you could order it in a different weight. So this is a 4-gram aluminum weight. You could actually get it with an 11-gram stainless steel weight, which would allow you to build this to a more traditional shaft, 45-inch spec, more traditional weighting. That's going to allow this golf club to play not just for that player who wants the high left, but also somebody who might want a little bit more control from a shorter center of gravity to shaft axis. It could give a little bit more playability. What makes me proud about the new line is how it's no longer a Mizuno driver, it's just for a specific person. The new line can fit every level of golfer. It can fit tour professionals and it can fit the highest handicappers, all with arguably some of the same heads. And that's what's really interesting about how we've designed the Z and the X. It all depends on where you need your weight, how much head weight you need, and all of these are adjustable now as well so that you can really dial it in for just the widest range of players we've ever talked to.